Two, one. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another exciting film journey here on Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are going to talk about a choice put forward by uh, Tammy, which I believe this is a birthday month for both her and Jake here. And we're going with one of her first choices first. Oh, here's Dustin. Hey, Dustin.
Hello, everyone.
Just made
it. I guess there's a lot of people who don't know that Dean Koontz was as much of a writer as Stephen King was. Maybe not as many movies, but definitely has some movies out there. So I'm going to bring up the Dean Koontz intensity.
He's basically like Great Value brand Stephen King. Although Great Value is a little more consistent, I think.
Well, Tammy, why don't you tell us what you chose for this Monday? What I would call it a TV mini series or TV movie thereabouts. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I guess so. It's Dean Koontz's Intensity. So,
Yep.
Did you want to tell us what IMDb says, please?
Yep, I will do that. So it was filmed in 1997. It rounds out to about 3 hours and 6 minutes. IMDb tells us a woman spending Thanksgiving at the home of her friend's family in the rural Pacific Northwest finds herself in the clutches of a disturbed serial killer. The TV movie is actually directed by Yves Simoneau. And Dean Koontz was one of the writers behind this, along with Stephen Token. And it stars John C. McGinley, Molly Parker, Blue Monkuma, Laurie Troiello, Brent Strait, Katie Stewart, Deanna Milligan, Kevin Smith, Piper Laurie, among others. So, why did you choose this TV movie, Tammy?
Well, I know I read the book, but I don't remember if I read the book first or saw the movie first. But all I know is when I saw the movie the first time, I got really like connected with it. I really liked it a lot. It, like I kept looking to actually get it for real because I had it taped for a while and everything.
Yeah, this was basically your unicorn film that you were trying to find.
Yes. You were with me the day that we were at Half Price Books and all of a sudden I went, oh! It was like, I don't care if I didn't even care what the price was, and it actually was decent, but I wasn't going to, if I didn't have money to buy anything else but that would have been fine because that's what I wanted. So, yeah, it was something about it. Just, I really wanted it. I really liked it. I've seen it. I don't know how many times I've seen it now, but yeah, it's just something about it. I really get into it.
Okay.
And it's not just because there's wolfies in it.
Haha.
Like you were teasing me yesterday.
If you want to try to convince us otherwise, sure, go ahead. But in any case, is that pretty much your first impressions, or did you want to go into your first impressions first?
I suppose. I mean, I guess I got really into it because he says throughout the movie, this is really intense, or this is really intense, or, can't you feel the intensity? I mean, you get the reference of intense and intensity throughout the movie, you know, and in reality, it is. It is exactly what it says. It is intense, you know. His his mind, the way he thinks, the way he's so off and so, you know, and the way he says things, the way he comes up with things is just like, who thinks this way? Who talks that way? Who acts that way? But he reasons why he does all this and things, and it's just like your mind, you're really, there's something wrong with you, dude.
Yeah, it's
And
about like, the excitement.
it definitely keeps you interested in it. You like, what is he gonna come up with next? And it's yeah, it's like, what off the wall thing is he gonna do?
Okay.
So
Is that it then for your first impressions then?
yeah,
Okay. Heading over to you, Jake. Was this a first time watch for you?
Yeah, it definitely was. I'm definitely a bit of a newbie when it comes to Dean Koontz. He's been on my to read list for a long time, and this title is definitely, I think, one of his better known titles. It's one that has been on my radar. There's so many books that are on my radar. Now, as far as the movie, I might have been aware that this was a thing. Couldn't swear to it. I mean, a TV miniseries from the late 90s, and I think it aired on Fox. Did I understand that correctly? I can't say that
I believe it aired on Fox, but it also aired on the USA Network.
That
And
don't mean shit to me. I didn't have to. That's like I said, like it may have been something that just completely flew me by when it came out. You know, now of course I do know John C. McGinley primarily from Scrubs, but I've seen him in a lot of stuff. I just know him as Dr. Cox. So to me, that added an extra wrinkle of fun for this one. And there were a few other familiar faces peppered throughout, as we were talking about before we started here. As an introduction to Dean Koontz's work, because this probably is the first film I've seen that is, I think, based on one of his books. It's pretty cool. I mean, it definitely lives up to its title. It is fairly intense. I think with some slightly better direction, it would have been really intense. It does have just enough of that TV movie of the week vibe that it does cut into its intensity. But McGinley, I love it when people play complete amoral sociopaths and have fun doing it. And I feel like he was having fun with this role.
I do myself. So
What's that?
I do myself.
So I think that worked really well. I think that the direction of most of the other actors ranged from pedestrian to moderately good. I think most of the other characters did their roles and did them well, but it was nothing to write home about. But fortunately, they did have that one central role where they were able to do that. Otherwise, for a TV movie, I think it was well made. And yeah, now I have another reason to finally read the book. I just don't know when I'll get around to it.
Okay. What about you, Dustin? Was this a first time watch for you?
Okay, so I only really knew about Dean Koontz just kind of from seeing his books everywhere. Like, he has his own section at Half Price Books the same way Stephen King does. And I have never heard anyone say anything nice about Dean Koontz. Like, it is always just like jokes and, just talking down on him. And it's like, that kind of colors your expectations. And so it was like, by Dean Koontz, I was like, should I skip this? And I was like, well, we'll try it. It's 3 hours. And it's like, well, okay. But it is definitely a mini series because the version I saw had like a break in the middle, to be continued, followed by credits. So it felt very much like Peter Benchley's The Beast, which I saw that when it was new on USA. It was like a 2-night event, and the pacing and just pretty much everything about this film reminded me of that. So to find out that that's indeed it made sense to me. So I am surprised I had never heard of this before, because it was actually quite good. I think being a TV movie made it a bit more bearable, because there are limitations for what you can and can't do on TV, or at least show on TV. Like, you can fly everything on TV, but you can't really have like hardcore blood and guts. Like, I feel like maybe sometimes the narrative would have warranted or wanted that, but it still went fairly far. And I thought this was I thought this was great. I'm genuinely surprised I had never heard of it before, or had heard anyone talk of it, or there was just nothing about it for my entire memory. I mean, being a 1997 movie and a TV movie, I mean, I think it was probably just kind of like, well, that was good, and forgotten about. Because that does happen to even good TV movies quite a lot. So that's just kind of my theory on maybe why I hadn't heard of it. But I was pretty impressed with it. Like, again, I watched Scrubs too, and so seeing Dr. Cox's actor, who I do not know his name, I can never remember his name. I always just call him Dr. Cox because I can't help myself.
John C.
His name was John C. McGinley.
John C. McGinley. Seeing him just like be unhinged was, well, it was kind of familiar, honestly, because he pretty much played Dr. Cox just like this guy. Well, to me, it seemed like he did, at least. And I thought the name intensity was a good one for this, because the killer's entire motivation is more or less just like thrill seeking. It's like, I want to experience like the most dark emotions in myself and from my victims. And so like, I'm going to go very, very, very far out of my way to like set this up. They were almost like, we don't really see a lot of the stuff he does, but it's almost it felt kind of like Patrick Bateman in the book American Psycho style kills, which in the American Psycho movie we don't really get to see him do a whole lot besides like stab and shoot people, whereas in the book, like, the book has some of the most unbelievable sadistic shit you can find anywhere. Like, there's one scene in the American Psycho book where I finished reading it and I had to put the book down for a few hours. It was just so far. And I feel like this is a story that, just from things that the killer, discussed and mentioned and sort of implied with, like, he has like files on all his victims, and he's describing, what his plan is for like his hostage. This seems like maybe the book does go into some of those details. So I think being a TV movie might have improved it, though, because it had to be reined in, because some of the content in the movie, I think, would go way too far if there wasn't some kind of restriction in place, if you know what I mean.
I can see
And that ended up making it, I think, more fun than like dark. I mean, it was very suspenseful, and it was definitely very dark, but it could have been, instead of like, oh, okay, I'm pretty sure she's gonna get out of this, but oh boy, this is tense. I'm pretty sure it could have been a lot more upsetting, let's put it that way. And so I was really happy with this movie. I'm pretty happy I saw it. I'm probably gonna start recommending it to people if I can, well, find it. As you said, this had a DVD, right? What did Half Price Books want for the DVD?
at the time they wanted $11.99 for it, but anywhere around it's like in the 30s to 50s right now as a DVD because it is out of print, and finding it for that was pretty good.
It's probably something that would have only been manufactured once too.
Yeah, if you've ever heard of Editor's Choice, yeah, that was like a line of.
I think I got it for like $10. I couldn't believe it. It's like mine.
Well, Half Price Books does that sometimes. Like I got Carnosaur 1 through 3 for like $40 total, which was insane deal at the time.
What was on my list every time we went to, over the years, every time we went to Half Price Books or this place or that place, any place that sold movies, it was on the top of my list every single time we went anywhere, So when it was there, it was just like,
No, it's that seems kind of comparable again to Benchley's Beast. Like
it's definitely one that I think should get like a Blu-ray release or something. They should at least.
Well, I agree. Yeah, what I meant was that the DVD release of The Beast is kind of like that in that it's out of print and it fluctuates between really valuable and just like okay, like between 10 to 30. Or at least it did a few years ago. I do know that Beast eventually made it to Blu-ray, although the Blu-ray is very, very rare. So I wonder if there's a similar situation with this movie where it does exist on Blu-ray. It was just maybe not like a big seller or something, and the Blu-ray is like $100 or whatever. Like I could see that maybe being the case, but this is definitely something that, at least to me, seems like it's underrated and underappreciated. So I'm really happy you guys had me see this.
Cool. And before meeting Tammy, I had actually heard of this. So during my downloading earlier days, I had actually found a copy of it, and I had at least a copy of it in my collection. So, but I had never seen it because I was a slight collector of trying to find some of the Dean Koontz movies out there, because a lot of the movies you might not even know that Dean Koontz was behind them, like the Watchers trilogy that's out there. I think Watchers 1 and 2 are on like a double feature, and Watchers 3. I don't think that's even on anything. I think it was VHS that it only went to, but Phantoms was another one. Hideaway was another one, which the book was better than the movie, but Jeff Goldblum actually was in the movie. So there were a lot of movies that were made. It's just, I think Stephen King was like the writer to go to around that time. But being an avid reader at the time, I also think that Clive Barker was another writer that was a contender for them, as well as John Saul, another one that I kept seeing the name everywhere, So.
And John Saul had some pretty cool stuff that got adapted. And of course, Clive Barker is like one of the greats of horror writers. So, but I don't know a whole lot about Dean Koontz other than just kind of like that reputation. Like is it? Do we know what? Like, has Stephen King ever commented on Dean Koontz? Like, what does he think of the guy?
I don't think. I mean, at one point in time, I thought that they were competitive with each other, but then
That's what I thought too. That's why I asked.
then I think like later they kind of like got used to each other in certain circles, and I think they just kind of respect each other, you know, as writers in their own guild. And I actually have found to me, Dean Koontz is like every other book is not that bad. I mean, Jan Yelchin, the young kid who played Scotty on Star Trek, the kid who died, he played on he played as a Dean Koontz one called Odd Thomas, which was supposed to spawn the rest of the series as movies, but you know he kind of died shortly after that. So, but other than that, I like the performance of McGinn here. I thought that it definitely was an intense atmosphere. Yes, it had that mini-series type vibe about it, but I honestly think it did better in that avenue, so that it wouldn't scare the public eye, you know, because if you know anything about the public and society, they don't want at least around that time they didn't want to be scared too much, or at least the TV networks didn't want to be scared or scare people too much, you know, even though deep down most of us want to get scared, or at least some of us that want to see them skate the boundaries and go to the take us to the edge of our seats, you know. But I enjoyed this once again, seeing it, and I think it is different, you know. So, in any case, Tammy, why don't you bring us into the plot?
Well, uh, basically, he's I guess you want to say he's quite psycho, and you as you go through this movie, you get to see different things he's done and different things he's continuing to do, whatever they get. It's just it keeps building and building, and then it does finally come to its climax. Kind of like I guess you'd have to say in the end he gets his, but anyways, well, we start out with a young girl. Her name is China, and you're seeing a very dysfunctional family. The parent, the mother, and her boyfriend are all they care about is partying. They're selling weed. They're you know basically not doing much to pay attention to her or anything, and she gets her first taste of how off the wall her mother and her mother's boyfriend can be when the neighbors come over and that evidently where they own the house they're living in, and wanted them to clean up the yard because they're trying to sell the place, and they were nicely talking to him about cleaning up the yard, and they get kind of forced into the place, and the next thing you know, the boyfriend blows them both away right in front of China. And it's like, really, that's what this young girl needs to see is, her mother's boyfriend go ballistic and blow these people away right in front of her, you know? And evidently his violence to them was nothing new, at least violence. He had no problem chasing her around the place and threatening her and um, just being not nice to her at all. So it goes from that to where you now see her as an adult, but you get flashbacks. Well, probably for a good for the first half of this, you see a lot of her flashing back to things that happened in her childhood.
Well, one of the things that she is telling her waitress friend that is trying to get her to go away to come to Thanksgiving dinner. One of the reasons why she is telling her about her past is to try to tell her, no, I don't want to go. You know,
Right, because she's not used to the good wholesome family get together thing. You know, that's not her thing. That's not how she was brought up. She wasn't brought up in a nice wholesome family, so she just doesn't feel comfortable in that. You know, and that's why she didn't want to go. So I guess what does everybody think of the beginning?
Well, that opening scene, yeah, I have to admit, that is kind of a traumatizing thing for a child to be living through. And then, and I will admit, once we get to the part where we find out this is a story and she's sharing it with her friend on their smoke break, my primary impression was, damn, the friend's cute. But yeah.
yeah, I thought the friend was cute, too. I think that
She
the
looks a
friend.
lot.
Go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say she reminds me a little bit of Joey Lauren Adams, but without the froggy voice. But, you know.
Okay. I kind of got the impression that she was really, 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 really begging her along to meet her brother in the long run, anyways.
Oh, yeah. I think it's pretty clear. It was a matchmaking mission. And it almost worked, too.
Almost. But
I think she would have gone home.
I have to admit, it is kind of hard.
I was a little bothered by how much the friend was begging her. I mean, she really didn't want to go. To be honest, I feel like even though she was pushing her, it was almost like prying too much from someone. If someone doesn't want to go, if she's saying no, she should just accept it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really know much about the actual relationship between these two. You just get a little bit there. So it's quite possible that they are as good of friends as China is able to be with anyone. It's quite possible that her friend genuinely had her best interest at heart. And it's clear she had ulterior motives because she's trying to hook her up with her brother. But I think exactly whether she was crossing a line, we really don't have enough information to know that. But I know what you mean. It definitely is. She's still definitely pushy.
It doesn't feel like a safe place because of all the security, but there's no real protection.
But anyways, go ahead.
Any other thoughts? Okay. So,
it's kind of hard to tell where it was going from this point, but I'll just let you guys roll with it.
What were you gonna say? Go ahead.
Oh, I found the opening it was like a false sense of security thing. Cause it's like, oh, okay, so we're telling that story, and I had no idea what this was going to be about at all. So when it suddenly got like really like she just wakes like we get all these kind of mundane like sitcom like moments, and it's kind of like and so I started to zone out, and well, then the movie actually starts, and it's like, oh shit. So
So yeah, then we move on to the nice, all the niceties. She does give in, goes to the family dinner, she gets introduced to her friend's brother. She helps the mom out with cooking and does the whole Thanksgiving thing, and everybody's having a wonderful time. And then she is awakened to screaming and things going on, and she realizes that there's something not right. And that's when you see one of the you know thinking back to her childhood. So she goes and she hides and realizes that you know it was a good thing she did, because this killer comes in there, and then she manages to come out and see basically he is her friend is just about dead. The parents are dead. She manages to get away and get outside and realizes that the her friend's brother is dead out in the little cottage or whatever that's on the property. And while she's out there watching this, she is seeing how deranged this guy really is by watching what he's doing in this cottage. And she realizes she cannot free her friend. And why, I don't know what really possessed her. That is the one thing I don't get. What possessed her to get into that motorhome, anyways, even though her friend was in there, and she should have known her friend was beyond help, even when he put her in there. But
Oh,
I
I
mean,
believe I know why she did. Um, it was what he was saying to the dead brother, because he was talking about Ariel, the little girl that we didn't know that he had locked up, like in some basement somewhere.
but
Uh,
she has that he did have Ariel.
and she overheard him talking about her to him, and how he would have really liked to have seen Ariel, um, or whatnot. He wishes that he could, or he could have done something better, to bring something back to Ariel, and he was airing this out to his victim, you know, and so I think because she overheard this conversation, she decided to follow him, and I guess subconsciously maybe she wanted to find a way to uh, get him back for what he did. Maybe, you know.
I don't know. I I always thought that besides her thinking that this Ariel existed and that there and everything, I thought that she was in a way thinking she was going to somehow free her friend. Because why else would you get into that camper? Knowing this guy is psycho, you're gonna. I understand that she was concerned about this Ariel that may or may not exist, but really to go get in that camper with him? I don't know if I would have gone that far.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would have jumped in the camper myself. What about you guys? Would you have done what she did? Jump in the camper? Jake, would you have?
I'm not so sure. Like I wondered about that myself. It One of the biggest issues I had with the movie overall, and I don't know how much of this is the adaptation, how much of it is the source material, how much of it is the performance or the direction of the lead actress. But there were a lot of moments where I was unsure why Laura, what's her face, China, did what she did. And that was one of them. That was one of the big ones. And I feel like if I were in her position, if I were trying to save my friend, it would make perfect sense. If I had just heard this guy saying some weird randomness to the dead guy with no context and no way to know what he meant, I don't think that would necessarily have got me to go do that. But the main thing is she just was so indecisive all throughout the movie. I feel like going into the camper is a decisive move. And I just found it weird that she did that and then just, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like if I had done that, it would have led to a confrontation much sooner. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but
Well, I guess now she's on the camper. So, but it doesn't entirely take her back to the cabin first. He ends up stopping for gas at a gas station, right, Tammy?
Correct. And well, there we see that she gets out of the camper and she's trying to um get the attention. She goes in the mini mart or gas station to let them know that what he is, and before they can call the police or anything, because he's already been in there chatting them up and everything else, So he goes to come back in, and she goes and hides, and um, then like all hell breaks loose. Dude goes berserk.
Well, he notices a knife that she had dropped on the ground, and he picks it up and he smells it and he says something about why it is so warm. And then he goes back aside, and I think that's when he kind of goes berserk, because then he realizes, oh well, there's something off here.
I think he would have gone back inside even if he wouldn't have found that knife, because he was just going to go berserk.
True. Another plot hole to me is right here, because eventually we learn that he is actually, as a job, he is a forest ranger of some sort. That later on that we find out, like, he's actually a cop, But you think that him being a cop in the area that these guys at the gas station would have, like, maybe recognized him. But we don't learn any of that until, like, much later. So I feel like that's kind of a plot hole. Possibly.
Well, there was no reason for him to do what he did. He just felt like it. I mean, there was no real reason for him to do what he did.
True.
He just went on one of his little tangents and was, especially when he's sitting there after he shot the older man and he's sitting there talking to him like that to him, and it's just like you got, like he's just talking to him, but the things he was saying was just really off the wall, It's just his whole way of thinking and talking was just weird.
Weird.
Here's my tip. There's nothing cool about smoking and having a stroke.
So, what did y'all think about the way that he was talking and reacting and whatnot in the gas station?
The way our delightful killer was with the people there, like,
Yeah.
I mean, again, I felt like he seemed like he was just kind of having a bit of fun, and he even told them like, hey, I was just joking with you, and then the guy just looks at him like, that wasn't funny. It's like, but he has his opinions and he's willing to share them. And they may be really, 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 really messed up opinions, but it is interesting the way that he kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, he kind of geeks out about it, and it's kind of fun to watch, even though you're kind of horrified at what he's actually saying. And you definitely, the people that he's talking to, you definitely are like, they're going, oh shit. And you kind of agree with them, but yeah.
Well, Tammy, bring us forward.
Dustin, did you have anything you wanted to say about the gas station? Okay. Well, anyways, dude takes off after he kills the people at the gas station. Takes off down the road, and she manages to get out. He's locked the place up. He's destroyed both inside and outside. But she manages to get a hold of one of a vehicle of one of the guys. Assuming it's the younger guy's vehicle.
Probably.
And decides to chase after.
Actually, we know it's the younger guy's vehicle because the first car she gets in, she sees that family photo with the other guy.
Right.
Now, did you guys mention? I'm sorry, I might have missed it. Did you mention his? Like, we were talking about him talking to the other people, but I was just doing it in generalities. But two specific things. One, he goes on about hunting and being a hunter. And the one guy says, I fish. And he's like, what are you talking about fishing? They got such dead eyes. You can't see anything. As you basically saying you can't see anything while you're killing them. And it's like, and they're sitting there going, what the hell?
Right, and then he does that weird pose about
right,
their eyes.
And then the other thing was, this was where he really went into lurid and descriptive detail about Ariel, and he shows them the picture and everything. And I don't know if you guys already mentioned that or not. I was a little distracted, but it definitely is a disturbing little bit of conversation that he has here, and it's no wonder the guy's like, no, that wasn't funny. That wasn't right, you know. But honestly, I might have missed where he initially mentioned her. This was where I really, really caught that China knew something was up as far as an actual captive. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
she might have figured it out before, but it was made clear that he had a captive. And she's hearing this whole thing while he's talking about it. So this was where I understood her continuing to pursue him a little more than I did previously, but yeah.
And it made perfect sense to me that this quickly becomes like a rescue mission. It's not just a, wait for the opportunity and turn him in.
Yeah. Like, I think she actually says, like, before she was ready to kill him, but like at some point, I think it was when she ran into Piper Laurie on the road, she said, I can't kill him. I need to follow him to, save the girl, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was made pretty apparent pretty quickly, I think. Like she sneaks into the RV. She's able to talk to her friend a little bit before her friend dies. And then it kind of shifts gears with her just following him around, like as he continues to commit crimes, and she sees him, like kill some people at a gas station. In a very felt kind of like an old country, a No Country for Old Men scene, didn't it? Like when Chigurh is when Chigurh like just like threatens that guy, and like he wins the coin flip. It felt a lot like that in that scene.
Oh, that whole friendo scene that people like so much. Yeah.
Well, when she runs into Piper Laurie's character, I think that sets off like a chain of events to some of the outside world, because her character ends up calling a sheriff, and he at first doesn't believe her, but then it's the name that she mentioned.
In his defense, her phone call had to be one of the most chaotic, indecipherable bits of panicked word salad I think I've ever seen anyone deliver in a film. And it's like, if he actually understood what she was saying, more power to him.
There's a hurricane going on in the back too, like it's like raining and shit.
Right.
Although, actually, I kind of want to comment that they said a lot of things in this movie. So, Slasher is a TV series where each season it's a different, murder mystery, for lack of a better term. And there's a character in Slasher season 1 who is very much like our killer here. And so I couldn't help but be reminded of that as this movie was like rolling along, we later learned that he is in fact a sheriff. But there is I guess spoilers for Slasher season 1. There is a sheriff who is doing basically the same thing as this guy, except he hasn't killed anyone. He's just like kidnapped a girl in a similar fashion to this. And I kept being reminded of that as this went on. And I wonder if Slasher kind of drew some inspiration from this scenario, because it's very similar, albeit it comes maybe 15 years before Slasher the series.
Could be.
So,
there definitely are. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say there definitely are parallels between this and other stories. And one of the more, in my mind, one of the more uncomfortable ones, we're skipping ahead a little bit here, and obviously anyone listening to this will have spoilers to this one. But Dave mentioned that this call, I think Dave mentioned, I think you're the one that mentioned that this sets off a chain of events, basically.
Yep.
Involving that good cop, like the good, decent cop who actually is trying really hard to, working the Thanksgiving weekend to try to solve this mystery. And everyone else is like, just go home, man. It's Thanksgiving. Forget about it,
Yeah.
And he's likable. Blooming Kuma is this guy, the cop, and he's like a local sheriff. And then he ends up, for me, I'm not going to put too much emphasis on it now because we'll come back to this later. But his fate uncomfortably reminded me of The Shining. Let's just put it that way. Like I said, when we get to that point, maybe I'll elaborate. But there have been a lot of comparisons of this character to Jack Torrance. So, part of that is that whole Kuntz versus King comparison that no one seems to be able to get away from. But
I think the better comparison would be he's like the sheriff at the end of in Misery. Like, we spend a lot of time with him, and then he just really does not do anything.
That's true.
One criticism I have of this movie is that there are a few things that are kind of set up or alluded to that don't necessarily pay off. Like, our good sheriff is there for like the twist when it's revealed what our killer really does, like during the day. So he talks about, I have to go to work.
That was a nice little bait and switch there, but again,
was a good scene. And so I feel like it was worth it for that. But at the same time, it's kind of like I expected more from this guy. Yeah. And also, like, the really odd, like, spirit wolves that appear here and there. I kept expecting them to do something. But no, they just observe, really.
What's the principle? Is Chekhov's gun, right? Is that the name of the principle? I feel like this one
be fired. Yeah.
What's that?
Chekhov's gun is like
if you introduce a gun, it needs to be used at some point. Like,
right.
They definitely thumbed their nose at that principle in this movie. I will admit.
To some extent, I kind of like that they did that, because you keep expecting like there are these two like external like forces that could rescue our main character and the kidnapped girl.
Right.
But in the end, it ends up being like the girl. It ends up being our main character's like experiences, like growing up like in such an abusive household, and having to know how to hide, having to know how to be quiet, having to know a little bit about how to like fight and be resourceful. So in a way, like, it was like her childhood was training her to stop this guy. And she still messes up, but through her own kind of grit, she makes it, instead of like, I kept expecting like the wolves to just maul the guy out of nowhere when they were like in the woods in some scenes, and that didn't happen. Or I expected the wolves to do something about the guy has these guard dogs. I expected that to happen. And a lot of the things I expected to happen did not happen. And I think I appreciated the movie for like leaving them, setting it up so that you expected one thing and then you get another.
And that's
very hard to do.
I hadn't thought about Misery, but you are right. The comparison with that cop is pretty spot on. Like I said, I have another reason for comparing it to The Shining, but we'll go into I guess more detail on that one later. But this guy gets called out of the blue on Thanksgiving. His wife doesn't want him to go. He at first doesn't want to go, but then he remembers that name, clicks, a light bulb goes off in his head. Ariel, I know that name, and that's where he gets involved. But
the missing persons folder, since like, did Ariel disappear last year? Like, did they ever find her? It's like, well, no, not necessarily. And it kind of shows just how, I don't know how anything like was ever accomplished before like 2002 or so, because everything was so disorganized. I mean, it's a little bit like remember back to our Totally Killer episode. where it's like, okay, here's the killer's DNA, and they're like, what's that? And they just like, let's get serious, and they throw it away.
Put it in the database. What database?
One of the running things in this movie, it ends up being a trope in many horror films,
Yeah.
which is the fact that if there is any kind of a holiday, the cops don't want to do jack shit
Right.
on holidays, which means no police work. If a murder is going on, you're gonna die. It's just gonna happen that way.
Especially that, what was it? It was like the chief of the highway patrol, I think, that would basically told him to fuck off. It's like, and then, and to Dustin's point, if I remember correctly, they said that the girl, I think, disappeared in Arizona, and it was something like she disappeared in October, and here we are, November, a year later. And I believe the sheriff was told that they got rid of their files after a year. So basically, he missed by a month. He missed that window. And it's like, that's pretty sad.
I mean, it also did kind of make sense too, because in a lot of these areas, there's just kind of nothing going on. I mean, you could do quite a lot of. Well, you could probably get away with a lot. Let's put it that way.
But, I mean,
there's just nobody around to like watch you, and like these little towns, they can't have that many resources for
and no cops.
Even so, 1 year. I mean, I've worked in companies more than once where I think actually from what I've seen, I kind of got the impression that it's sort of more of a standard operating practice for most companies to keep your records for like maybe 2 years. Just 1 year does not seem like a long period of time. It's just, I don't know. It seems crazy to me. But anyway.
For an area
with that particular case, I think too. So you kind of had to listen for this detail, but he killed her whole family. Like there was nobody left to really look for her.
Well, you got that impression at the end when they were trying to figure out her future care. I hadn't really caught that point earlier, but it was definitely at the end of the movie. You're like, oh, shit, she got nowhere to go back to. Yeah. But it does make sense because he does seem to not hold back when it comes to the killings. Yeah.
And like with a lot of emphasis on like the emotional like suffering. Oh, and the physical suffering too. Like there was a lot of illusions. There was a lot of like, I'm trying to figure out a delicate way to put it. There was a lot of like implied rape and off-camera rape in this, like, and it was it seemed like for our killer, it was about just causing pain. It was just like, yeah, I did this because, I knew that would, maximize the suffering. Like, that didn't seem to be his, like, main thing, or, like, what he was after for, like, kidnapping people for as long as he did. It was just all about, like, well, intensity, like the intensity of just hurting people, like, as much as possible. So it was, I don't know, if this is a movie that if you think about some of the things that the killer says he did, like, a little too much, like, they would get maybe a little bit unbearable. Like, did you kind of get that feeling there too, Jake? Or so I know you're a little bit more in tune with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I agree. I think you said earlier, I think you were the one who said earlier, that was kind of, thank God it was a TV movie because they couldn't show a lot of this stuff. And this is true. And this is a good example of a kind of story where sometimes less can be more. but definitely seeing the aftermath of what he did to that family at the beginning, near the beginning, I should say, rather than watching him go through each of the acts, I think that was a good play.
I kind of feel
Yeah.
like he got fixated on Ariel, and
Yeah.
He did. He pretty much admitted that he got fixated on her because, for whatever reason, like he couldn't break her the way that he
Yeah.
broke his other victims. So that's
Right.
why he was sort of obsessed with it.
and
And
another thing
he was
is
he was
she
playing for
is-
some sort of long payoff too, if that.
Oh yeah.
Like just like telling her like what he was going to do. Like the scenes where he does talk to her, like you get a little bit of it's like, yeah, I'm going to. There's a lot of like really uncomfortable language. It's like, you know, I'm gonna put this inside you, and it's you know, it was I was kind of surprised they could get away with that on TV. I mean, I used to watch a lot of Law and Order like SVU, and they would sometimes talk about stuff like that in some of the episodes, but this was kind of a few steps further, you know, like to a living like victim. It's like
and I feel like he, the way that he had her dressed, and the way that he had like all these dolls along the wall in that thing, he was trying to keep her innocent, at least until she was of a certain age. Like he was putting her on a pedestal, at least until she grew into a blossoming woman, and then he could feel like he could take advantage of her. You know,
he even said as much too. Like before he kills like the gas station guys, he's like, "Yeah, this is what I'm gonna do." You know, I'm just keeping her till she's ripe, and it's like, and they're kind of looking at each other like, "Get out." Like they had no idea what to do to that. They died like right away, so I guess it wasn't too big of a problem. But they really, when she ran in there, you know, screaming, you know, the killer is coming. You're like, don't let him know I'm here. You know, call the police. And they're like, huh, what? You know, a lot of people in this movie kind of had that like, wait, what's going on? Just like slow, like attitude. It was kind of frustrating, honestly, because I mean, it's you know, something's clearly going on, and you're just like, well, I think I'll just stand here and get killed. No, I'm getting all these warnings. Better not heed any of them. Like, so, but
makes you think that people out there in small towns are just easy pickings.
I mean, I think a lot of them are. So it well, the way you said that reminded me of I used to live really far, like up north in a small town. It was like the biggest. There were several small towns around it, but it was the biggest small town by like 4 times. Like it was an 8,000 person town, and it was the biggest city for like for like 40 miles. And I remember I had to go to a dentist appointment in one of the nearby like smaller towns, because everything is so spread out in that kind of area. And I ended up getting kind of stranded out there. Like my ride basically took off instead of taking me home. And I was talking to my friend Andrew. Like he couldn't pick me up because he was at work. And I was just kind of hanging out at the bar trying to figure out like, okay, what do I do? Like, do I just have to wait till like 9 o'clock when he gets off of work to get picked up? And some guy who was a little drunk already was like, well, I can take you home. And it's like, And I was talking to my friend about it, and he's like, well, you know, I've been to that town, and let me put it this way, like, you're probably more dangerous than anybody who would actually pick you up. And, like, I kind of jokingly said that, and the guy actually looked visibly nervous, and all his friends were like, oh, you know, well, if you disappear, we'll know what happened to you, man. And it's like, oh, okay. And he was a bit of a reckless driver, but it really wasn't too bad. So, but whenever there's a story like this, I do kind of wonder, you know, in situations like that. Is everybody like as safe to be around as they kind of present themselves? So
Alrighty,
hopefully that story made sense. But I mean, just in the woods, like you can't really tell, I suppose. And I guess with a smaller population area too, like there's probably, I think a lot of things are kind of based on trust too, because you sort of get to know most of the faces around you, which would explain why nobody, when it's kind of when it's revealed like who our killer actually is, like in his area, it makes a bit more sense as to why he's never gotten any scrutiny, because he's the sheriff. So, why would anybody be like, hey, the sheriff said something weird the other day?
Right.
Like, probably not the case, whatever.
Right. It's kind of like Dexter, where, you got the guy as a serial killer, but he's also a blood spatter analyst. So he's kind of supposed to geek out over blood, So.
Or it makes sense that he would know like a lot about like pending investigations or cases, or or a lot of times with Dexter's, with the stuff Dexter would do, just as an example, a lot of times in the show, like when he would investigate stuff on his own, people would, even when he did get caught like doing his own investigations because he was going to go track the guy down and kill them, people would kind of hand wave it a little bit because it's like, oh, okay, he's working on that case off the books. Time off, and it would just be, everybody would just think everything was okay. And arguably things were okay because he wasn't necessarily doing anything wrong a lot of the times, especially if you read the books, because holy crap. Like the Dexter's victims in the book are like evil the way like villains in a children's cartoon are evil, just with no qualities whatsoever. It's like they're like all like I remember the first Dexter book. It's like all of, I think we see him kill like 4 or 5 people in that book, and they're just like all unrepentant pedophiles. It's like he's like holding the guy down and like slicing him up, and the dude's like, "I hope the last one was yours." It's like, okay, these guys are just don't feel bad for any of them. So it's really easy to be on Dexter's side in that, and this has become a digression. Sorry about that, but anyway, back to our very little TV movie.
Tammy, did you want to bring us back to where we were?
Now I'm trying to figure out where we were because we got so.
Well, we are kind of we're still in the first half. We're sort of at the chase phase of this, where after he, delivers his like Anton Chigurh like speech and like blows away the gas station guys. Like she gets into the RV. Like I think before she was just like trailing the RV in another car. Now she's actually in there. She takes the gun from the dead guys, so this actually really annoyed me. Like later on, like she's had the gun on her for like several hours, and she doesn't seem to she doesn't check how many bullets are in there. She doesn't remember what he said about what he's going to do with the bullets.
Right.
Like, she did not inspect the gun. She just picked it up, and it's like, it didn't work on him. Why wouldn't you, like, at least the safety wasn't off, but
yeah,
and well, I guess that scene is coming up pretty soon, so we may as well go into it. But eventually, like, he figures out that she's like in the trailer, and he's kind of ready for her, and she does get the drop on him with the gun, and he kind of calls her bluff, and when the gun clicks, he's like, oh, it's like I was only so sure that you had the gun from the convenience store. Oh man, if I had been wrong, there would be a big hole in my head right now.
Right.
And he's like he's kind of thrilled that it's like, whoa, I almost lost. Because again, it's about the excitement and the the exhilaration for what he's doing. It's like, well, the intensity of the moment is why he's doing all this crap. Like he's really just a thrill seeker at the end of the day.
The other thing we get a little bit before that is the part where she actually she starts to go down the stairs, and she actually kind of does a meet and greet of Ariel.
Actually, maybe even before that, did you guys? I apologies, I'm having trouble focusing tonight. But did you talk about the part where she catches up to him and reboards the trailer? Because Dustin, you said something about he noticed that she was in the trailer, but basically, because that's worth mentioning, because we've alluded earlier to the wolves, and that's where they first made their appearance.
Yeah.
Because basically, she comes barreling up the highway, hoping to catch him. She runs into Piper Laurie's character, and then continues on. And then overtakes him and is running out of gas, and she's like, okay, I can't follow him. So she parks across the road and then goes into the woods. And here she's holding the gun. Like, I'm sitting here thinking she's going to try and pick him off or something. She's holding the gun. But while she's there, she has this wonderful spiritual moment with these pack of wolves. And then she goes and gets on the trailer, and he figures it out because basically she ended up tracking dirt in. The one time.
She closed the door, and then.
Well, yeah, she also closed the door that he had left open. Yeah.
He sees her footprint.
She finally,
she faked him. She faked him out with she just left her car abandoned in the middle of the road.
Yeah,
to get him to stop, and he was already kind of suspicious of that. But again, because he's doing this for the thrills, he's just like, let's see what happens if I just let's let this play out.
But this is the part where her stealth finally fails her. And one of the cool things about us continuing to see bits of her childhood and understanding where she came from, for a while there, I kind of was like, okay, we're seeing a lot of these flashbacks and spending a lot of time on her childhood. And I don't know if we really got enough payoff for the amount of time we spent on that. But one interesting payoff that we did get was in the cabin, the scene that you were talking about, Dustin, where with the Russian roulette scene, basically, he straight tells her, I'm amazed I didn't notice you. And I
couldn't hear you. I couldn't pick you up. Breathing was just completely.
Normally, I at least either hear you or smell
you. So basically, the idea, I guess, is that she spent so much time in her childhood either hiding or trying to be unobtrusive or trying not to get in the way or just basically trying to be left alone. And she spent so much time since then trying to be left alone that she almost, one thinks she almost has a ninja level of hiding her presence and moving stealthily. It's just when she makes stupid mistakes like she did when she tracked Mud into the trailer that she gets caught. But under normal circumstances, this is a girl who could probably sneak up on anybody. And so it is kind of interesting that we understand that because we know her childhood. But,
And I do like how the killer is genuinely impressed by this. It really saves her. It really saves her life ultimately because instead of just shooting her right away, I mean, he does do the Russian roulette scene, but you can tell that he'd be disappointed if she actually drew the bullet.
Yeah,
because he's like, oh, I can have a witness for this satanic thing I've been planning and grooming up for a year to do. I can actually have somebody watch.
Well, and when he realizes is that she goes towards Ariel and knows Ariel's name. I like how he just talks to himself. Okay, this is decidedly unfunny anymore.
Yeah, this is not fun anymore. This is
And-
decidedly not fun. And
And,
yeah,
she does say that little prayer, the untouched thing while she's on the stairs.
untouched and alive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He hears her say it too, so he's like, I have heard a lot of prayers. I've never heard that one. Tell me about that.
Right.
Pistol whip. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, it is interesting that he yeah, I guess his curiosity and his obsession with living life on the edge really does save her, because I think most people would have been like, okay, this chick's dangerous, I need to do something about her before I do anything else. Yeah.
Definitely don't need to leave her alone like all day here.
Yeah.
Although, like, he probably thought that he had a pretty good. He probably thought he had it handled, because he tied her up pretty good. Like, he had like real handcuffs. Like,
Yeah.
I love how this killer, like, he used chains instead of just like rope or something that you could just like nibble through.
Yeah.
It was very well thought out. Well, as much as it could have been, at least. You know what I mean?
Those were both wrist and anklet cuffs.
Yeah.
That would have been considered body handcuffs.
Not to mention,
law enforcement grade too.
Mm-hmm.
not to mention that he had her chained to the table as well. Like, yeah. And I don't think he expected her, and frankly, I didn't expect her to do what she ultimately did to get out of the chair, which is literally throwing her entire self and the chair down the stairs with a cement floor at the bottom. If that had gone any differently, she would have just snapped her neck or had a fatal concussion, or God knows what might have happened. And I really did think that ranks high on her dumb choices throughout the film. It just
what else could she have done?
What's that?
What else could she have done?
She might have found another option. I couldn't tell you for sure. That was a big house with a lot of things in it. I looked at that stairwell and I looked at her looking down those stairs and I was like, you're not going. No, she did it.
I mean, she did knock herself out for at least a little bit. Like,
yeah, she did.
Maybe not like an hour, maybe like an hour or two. Because, I mean, you could tell she started working on that right after he left.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was not a easy choice, but that did break the chair like right away. Because I think I maybe would have tried that myself, honestly.
Did anyone else?
It's like those stairs were like metal, and if you landed direct with the chair, like directly, like if you threw yourself back on it, the chair would take all the force and just pop apart, and that's what happened. So,
yeah. Now, did anyone else get the impression? Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe my eyes deceived me. I don't know. Her hands were bound close in cuffs, bound in front of her very closely. And that's why the reason she made that move. I swear I saw her arms fly out as she was going down those stairs.
Because the thing keeping them in place broke like right away. That was one of the first parts of the chair that shattered. So
when she was back at the bottom of the stairs, though, I could swear I saw her hands again tightly together. Well, I mean, like I saw her arms go out again. Maybe my eyes played everywhere. What's that?
I did too. Her arms splayed kind of everywhere because the whole thing tying it together, like she still had the cuffs on, but they didn't look like super tightly bound to me. It looked like a lot of the chains it looked almost like the chains sort of broke from that.
Yeah. I don't know. Again, maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me.
That could have been a goof that I missed.
Yeah.
So.
Anyway,
I don't remember seeing her arms do that, but I do remember the first time I watched it and she was gonna go down them stairs. I was like, "Oh, I know."
I don't know. She even said something before, like, "Oh, but like, do we really have to?" Or I can't remember what she said, but she said something.
Well, I know Tammy really likes the upstairs of the house.
I mean, it's basically like
that was a nice house.
when I was really little, my aunt's first husband, his name was he was just called Uncle Mac. He was like a stock investor or something. I know it was never really clear what he actually did. Like I remember he had like a little house like in like a suburb. But he had been supposedly working on something like up until about when I was like 7 or 8 or so. Like something he was having something built, like I didn't really understand what they meant. What he was having built was like a luxury cabin in the woods. This was like a 3-story mansion made out of logs, basically. And it looked an awful lot like kind of like the killer's compound here. Like it's just like a 2-story like cabin with like a basement and just like a lot of like ground covered. Like there were like extra buildings on the property. There was like a shed. There was a hunting blind. It really did look kind of a lot like Uncle Mac's old house. So that's what it. Well, I guess nobody else would know what that looks like because you never met the guy or what were there. But that's what the whole thing gave me like woodland mansion like vibes. And it was a big house, and that's what it reminded me of. Like it was a very like clearly luxury house. Like it looked like it would have probably cost like today that house would probably be like even in the middle of nowhere, probably like $1 million. So
Okay.
I mean, I thought he was like a doctor or something at first, actually.
Oh, the serial killer dude?
Yeah.
Well, he did play a doctor.
he did play a doctor, but when we saw him at work before, when he was kind of framed in a way that you could tell he was wearing a uniform, but you couldn't tell what kind of uniform. They did almost look sort of like scrubs. So I was like, oh, he does something important, shit.
But what do y'all think about that padded room in which Ariel actually is in, and about Ariel herself as a character?
Well, it was a padded cell, really. Like it was a soundproof cell for just, well, I don't know. It always makes me uncomfortable to say the word, but I think we know why it was soundproof and everything too.
And from his files, it looks like he's actually killed a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. I thought it was interesting the way that it was set up, like how he had the basement and he had just this big chunk of wall just taken out, and then it was set back way in there, like this rough hewn tunnel. It just was really interesting how he had it set up. But yeah,
it makes sense that it would be like that because I get the feeling that if you're gonna build a secret room in your basement, you don't want people to know about it. And so you would have had to have done it yourself. And if you're not like an experienced builder, like if you don't build basements for a living, I feel like it would look kind of ragged, even if you did a really good job, you know? And that's kind of the look it had. Like it was still very like meticulously clean, but it looked very like done by one guy, you know?
Yeah. And I'm
yeah.
sure the rest of the house was built by an architect, but one man who does not know about architecture probably would just like dig a fucking hole, put in some padded walls, and make sure that there were some decent locks. You know.
Yeah.
And what do we think about Ariel herself?
I think the actress did a good job of just portraying someone like intensely traumatized, because from those conversations that he has with her, we can tell like how he's, you know, like what he's basically just been threatening her like the whole time with just unspeakable like.
Yeah.
Well, the whole murder that he did was specifically for her. To be
Yeah,
honest.
and it was to amplify like the terror, because every time he goes out and kills somebody, he's like he makes sure to take pictures and get souvenirs, and he shows them all to her, and she's dealt with it for a year by just shutting down. And I think he pretty much states that that's one reason why he's kind of waiting to kill her, because he wants to get a reaction out of her. And she was just so closed
That
off.
brother's
trauma.
CDs were actually or tapes were actually in her parents' house, so that's why he went and chose that family.
Yeah.
So that he could bring back the news and hopefully crack her mind.
Well, he says that they had all his records, and that he found a couple of her CDs in her room. He found a couple of the guy's CDs in her room. Yeah, he describes to China, like he says, like there's a moment where they crack, and that's what he lives for, and that's why he does these long term. You get the impression that he has done this several times before, but he does say it. He says Ariel has lasted longer than anyone.
She's like the uncrackable mind,
right.
and it's infuriating him each time that her mind doesn't crack.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's
infuriating and exciting at the same time, you know?
That's a little bit of a trope in some horror movies. I'm remembering the one from 3 from Hell, like when they have the cartel guy tied up, and they're just like, they're going to set him on fire, but they're just kind of like staring at him. And one of the characters is like, what are we waiting for? And Otis is like, just waiting for him to break. You can always tell. Something in the eyes just goes. And like the guy's lip finally quivers a little bit, and he's like, there it is. And then they light him on fire. It sounded like he was kind of describing that, or this is probably going to sound really stupid, but the first thing that came to mind was in Dragon Ball Z when Cell becomes perfect and he's talking to Trunks, like Trunks fails to take Cell out, and Trunks is like, I failed, just kill me. And Cell kind of lays out like his philosophy. It's like, you know, I'm not going to kill you now, but I'm going to do this tournament and just like a bunch of threats. And Trunks is like, why? What's the point? It's like, well, it's, you know, what I love the most about when I do things like this is just seeing people's faces contort with fear. There's this look that they have that I just love seeing. And like Trunks has this look of horror, and Cell's like, that's it, that's the look. So that's something that different villains and killers have mentioned in films before, and it's always kind of a fun thing to hear discussed, because it's
even in Clockwork Orange when him and his droogs go to that writer's house, and they literally just rape his wife in front of him. That broke his mind down, you know. That I mean that's just a slight description, but it's
Yeah, I think it's a good like irredeemable villain motive to just be like a sadist like that.
yeah, that's for sure. But ultimately, we have the moment where where the wolves or Tammy actually likes the white wolf that shows up to her. Right?
Yes.
You
That's
thought that it was very pretty.
very beautiful wolf. Yes.
Yeah, there's some interesting thematic stuff at play there. It's not really said like what the wolves represent. It's just something you kind of feel out, isn't it?
I feel
I
like
think they give her. I think they give her strength. Is what it is. They give her the strength that she needs to do this.
And
Yeah.
like flip that
Yep.
table too.
And dude, he freaked out about the wolves and the fact that his dogs didn't do anything about it because he smelled them.
Right.
Track too, like a big track. And he's like, I did enjoy some of the moments where he's kind of like yelling at the dogs. It's like, you should be doing cartwheels at this. What's the matter with you? And you can tell it like bothers him. Like when they have that conversation after he catches her, and she mentions like that thing her mom used to do about like avoiding looking at like the clear sky or like the stars or whatever it was, because it felt like somebody was watching her and like judging her for the things she was doing.
I think
Like
that's
that genuinely got to him. Like you could tell it bothered him a lot. And he was like, well, I don't think that. Yeah, and it's like, you clearly do. And when he saw the wolves like in the forest, it's like the wolves let her reach out and pet them. Like the wolves were like with her. Like they kind of like growl at him too. Like he was really freaked out by the wolves.
Yes, he was. And immediately after she was trying to tell the wolf to go away, she had enough strength to move that entire wooden table up and over her, so that she could take her chair with her to the basement. And the wolf was not anywhere near to be found. So it made me think like that wolf was like a representation of her spirit.
That makes sense. That makes sense to me because like she could not move that table at all. Like she ripped part of it off before she could lift it, and then after like seeing the wolf, she just flips the whole thing over. Like I don't want to say effortlessly, but just like in one like motion.
One He-Man like moment.
It's like flipping a car all out of nowhere. It was pretty cool.
It was.
But it also did kind of emphasize that there was something going on for the wolves there, and I know movies don't always have to be like clear about like their symbolism, and sometimes it's better that way. But I personally would have liked to have known like a little bit more, like maybe like a conversation about like what the wolves could have been, like either before the kidnapping or at some point, like when she's having a moment alone. I would have liked to have seen that, but I can see why they maybe wouldn't have thought they needed that,
If you go down the line of thought that the wolves were actually in her mind, then you have to actually think, okay, how was it that this wolf print ended up being like real and being able to be smelled by the dude. So
that was what I thought up until that moment where he found like physical evidence of the wolves actually being there. Like when he found that paw print, I was like, oh, the wolves are there, okay. And it was just kind of wild that they didn't do anything more actively,
agreed. But she ends up doing that. She ends up tumbling down, getting herself down there, and she is able to find a drill nearby to at least get her feet, but she cannot get her hands at all. So she ends up having to go and take a hammer, and evidently she is very easily able to take those doors off their hinges. And she tries to elicit help from Ariel. Now, one thing that we didn't mention is that Ariel is reading a copy of The Wind in the Willows, and one of the things that she is able to set up between herself and the girl is that Badger. There's a page that says Badger comes to the rescue or something like that. And she mentions that Badger sent her there the first time that she talked to her or whatnot. And I'm going to take
a way to connect and reach her, yeah, because she's so just retreated into her mind. And we get that flashback of her having read Wind in the Willows herself, dealing with her awful parents.
She ends up having to tell her a story from her birthday, in fact, where that one particular boyfriend friend had brought a cake home, and she couldn't blow out the candles, and he was infuriated. And for some reason, I do like that the line that he said. Then the trolls will get you, or something like that,
Yeah, at first you think he's being cutesy, but then he starts actually chasing her like he's going to try and hurt her.
Yeah, which alludes
to...
Yeah.
I think it's pretty gross.
Yeah, she ends up hiding underneath her bed, and a cockroach ends up walking along her, and it turns out that it seems like the boyfriend and her mother actually knew she was actually underneath the bed, because he came and stuck his head down under. He's like, "How you doing, birthday girl?" But it's this story that she tells her. So she does actually get out of her reverie and come and ultimately help her get those cuffs off. So it is helpful to tell her a little bit about her experiences, to kind of show her that she's been in a similar situation, and I do believe that she finds the suit that is downstairs after she goes upstairs and kind of sets her down. She's like, "We got to figure out a way to get us out of here." So she takes the suit. She goes to the kitchen first. She finds a bottle of ammonia and puts it in a spray bottle. And then she goes and finds the suit that evidently the serial killer uses to train the dogs. What do y'all think about that suit?
I mean, it's something I've seen before. That is how you train attack dogs like that. With that big, heavy,
right,
burlappy kind of thing. So I thought that was. I didn't quite expect them to attack her anyway when she was in that. I kind of expected them to be "Oh, okay, you're, when you're wearing that, it's." I almost thought for some stupid reason maybe they wouldn't recognize her; they'd think it was him. But then it's they can still smell her, and it's "Oh, duh, idiot." That was kind of an embarrassing moment for me.
I guess I wasn't surprised because that is what they train them. That's what they use when they're training them. So the dogs, in the dog's mind, oh, hey, you're supposed to,
you're supposed to attack when they're wearing that. You're supposed to attack them. Like, it's okay. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. So there
did-
appear to be
I
three.
do think one cool thing, and I do think one cool thing about the dogs versus the wolves is kind of a nice little thing they have here, because you've got basically this guy who's unbridled aggression, you could say. Like he knows how to keep it in check for the long game if it's, but really, he's all about the kill and all about the the winning and the dominating and all this stuff. So it makes sense that the dogs that he has trained are particularly vicious and nasty, but the wolves could still do a number on them. Again, I still think that the wolves might have been a little better incorporated into the story. It's kind of it feels like a dangling thread or a missed opportunity, but they do make an interesting contrast with the dogs still, and the fact that they're associated with this girl who is anything but as proactive as he is. But
Maybe if they might have instigated some of the wolves, like in the flashbacks, like helping her along when she was younger.
Right. Well, I don't know about that, but like the idea of, I guess at the end of the day, like there's something. They're beautiful and they're clearly dangerous, but and you would expect them probably to win in the end. But whereas the dogs are more just straightforward, just actively go for the kill, So they do make nice reflections on the other two characters. But anyway, and as far as the whole thing with her going out in the suit, I did like her whole thing of the spray bottle with the ammonia. You feel kind of bad for the dogs, but they were such assholes. Too bad.
Well, yeah, she definitely was trying to make sure she took every precaution because she did see that person come out of that.
Yeah, he had another captive, and he was like, "You're free, go on." And the guy kind of crawled out of there, only to get like eaten by the dogs right away.
Yeah,
and
I like
at least she got to see that, and that let her plan around the dogs. Because I think if she hadn't seen that, she would have been in a lot more trouble.
Yeah, I don't think she would have realized how dangerous they really are,
or that they were there at all. Because remember, like right when he got home, like he commented on, it's like, stat, make sure our guest doesn't know you're here.
Well, she did realize they were there when he let that one guy out.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying that's what that. I'm saying that's why that scene was good to have, because like it gave her some warning. Like I'm saying that's why that was important to have there, because without that, maybe she wouldn't have known about the dogs, and been able to plan around it.
True
that.
Yeah,
he did want them to make themselves scarce at first, because I think he wanted to make that reveal just to mess with her more than anything.
Right.
Show that it's not going to be easy to get off the property.
Exactly.
But she does ultimately at least kind of stun the dogs, at least for the moment, while she goes and grabs the RV, which trips the alarm. Because evidently an alarm. Which makes Edgler, that's his name, aware that something is going on, and he explains it that he might have left some meat that the dogs might have been aware of in his RV.
Like he left her friend's body in the RV. It's still changed to a mattress in there. So
Yeah,
you know,
which, if you think about it, is a little creepy.
I mean, it's a lot creepy. I mean, like the girl had when she's getting Ariel out of the house, Ariel had to climb down there, and I was kind of surprised she didn't like warn Ariel. It's like, okay, there is a body in here. So,
Well, she is in a catatonic like state, so.
well, I suppose, yeah, she was still shut down. I just thought it was kind of odd that she didn't like, warn her or anything. But I mean, that kid had seen so much at that point that I guess it didn't really even. This didn't matter.
But there is the moment where she does have to coach her across to the RV. I love how the one dog just kind of slid off the RV, just literally like.
Yeah, they were kind of clumsy animals.
Well, there was some rainwater on the RV, so it made it slick. So it just kind of just slid off the metal. So I thought that was kind of funny. And then the other, there was another one that was crawling across the ladder, which was a little cool to see because German Shepherds are smart dogs. Personally, I probably would have gone with Dobermans because Dobermans are more intense and probably more violent. But I'm not sure how trainable they are. So, but the effects of the dogs being there, and the fact that she literally had to beat the dog to death. And then, of course, we have her run into the cop that is actually on her side, but he doesn't realize that I think that she's in the vehicle. And then the other cop car shows up, and what do y'all think about that moment of?
That was a great reveal, and it felt like our hero cop was in the movie pretty much just to die in this moment, like for this gag. And I think that kind of cheapened his character a bit. Like I didn't really like that very much, honestly.
It was a
great oh hell moment,
It was a great bait and switch gag because we had the RV coming from one end, the plainclothes cop in his personal car who's looking for the silver RV coming from the other direction, and then the cop car coming from the other direction. And then, you basically have our killer killing the cop. And this is the part, okay, this is where I'm going to explain more why I was reminded of The Shining. This reminded me, the movie version, mind you, because the book and the TV miniseries did not do it this badly. Because in the book and the miniseries, it was a croquet mallet and not a freaking axe. But the character that was played by Scatman Crothers, I can't remember his name right away, but the groundskeeper, the one that explained about The Shining in the first place, he comes back from his vacation from Florida all the way back to Colorado, shows up at the hotel. The moment he shows up, Jack hits him with an axe and kills him. And I'm like, the hell did y'all do that for? And this scene felt to me like that,
Yeah, there's I don't know, stuff like that can be really funny, despite still hurting you inside. I've been watching the Has Been Hotel series, and there's a moment like that where a character does this big dramatic thing, trying to kill a villain, and the villain just what? And the villain just blasts them with light and they just disappear. Like nothing happens. And it's kind of played for laughs, sort of like moments like this. And it felt very much like, the cop at the end of Misery and, our cop friend here and Scatman Carruthers, just like, I'm here to help. Oh God, I'm dead. So it's something it's a trope I kind of hate almost, but sometimes it is very, very funny. Let's phrase it like that. So, but I mean, that did make for a we're still on our own.
Yep.
It was messy.
Yeah, I
But
thought
it
that
was-
was pretty fucked up too. It was just like, well, he just, oh my god, he just killed the cop. Okay,
At least give him a moment where he actually comes stumbling back to the cabin and find them and rescue them with him or something like that. Instead of just offing him for that moment. But I do like what she does to him after that. Because she is able to set up the whole scene before he comes back to the cabin, and he does have that moment where he talks to his dogs. I'll deal with you guys later.
That was maybe my favorite scene. Like that was great.
But he does come
Deal
down.
with you losers later. Like emphasis on the losers. That was so funny. Like he actually calls them losers.
And then he comes down to the basement, and he thinks he's got the upper hand. He tells them to put the weapons down, and he comes in, and he's like fist pumping in the air, kind of doing more talking than doing.
He's gloating, yeah.
And after his spiel, she's like, well, guess what? And lights the floor on fire, and he's like, ah, and then she ends up
yeah, that's a callback to an earlier moment where he was she tried to burn him with a lighter, and she was like, people have tried to do so many things to me over the years, pulled out so many weapons. You're the first who's tried to butane me to death. And he's just laughing about it. And I wonder if he had realized what was in that picture right away, if he could have gotten out of it. Like, I think in the moment he was just like so like fired up that it didn't occur to him what was going to happen.
Nope, but she splashed that thing on him and then lit him on fire and then literally bolted him in the fucking room, and he's screaming his head off, and they are just sighing with relief. But then of course you got that court scene where they're all against her, being like the guardian. What do y'all think about that moment?
It was good to have some resolution on what's happening now, but man, at the same time, it felt like the movie was going to leave like on a sad note. Which there were many times during this movie I thought that maybe they weren't going to get out of this, because sometimes with TV movies, like they do give you do get a bad ending from time to time. I don't mean like bad, like not good. I mean bad, like the heroes lose. And this felt like one of the movies that could have maybe done that. So when that scene came up, I was like, oh, this is our, the hero loses moment where, she rescued the girl, but Ariel's brain is just like permanently fried. And so
yeah, I thought that was kind of
yeah.
fucked up that hearing. How they were trying to be nice, but yet they were, blaming her for all kinds of things, and it's like, but she found her. You know, if it wasn't for her, she would probably be dead. You know, if she wouldn't have found the girl to begin with. You know, because he had every intention of killing her.
Yep.
It's like, well, we find it disturbing that you set the Uber rapist on fire. And it's like, guys, what are we doing? Like that was kind of the most bullshit part of that whole proceeding. I think it's like, you know, some of the decisions you made. I mean, granted, they all worked out and were all the best choice you could have made in each situation. But some of those ideas you had were kind of disturbing. So we don't think you're really fit to take care of anybody. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Like the whole their logic was really stupid. Honestly, like they were ridiculous. And I know if Brandon was here, he could comment on like the mental health bureaucracy aspects of it.
Unfortunately, I think that the mental health bureaucracy, the whole thing evolved at that point in time, would probably have thought that, okay, we are the specialists, we are the people in charge, and we are the ones who have her best interests in mind. And
the logic they used, yeah.
And unfortunately, half of the time they were wrong when that happened.
Well, unfortunately, Tom, a lot of times, here you have people who are dealing with people who nominally have a science background and also people who nominally have a policy background. And I think both of those backgrounds, a lot of times people tend to think very highly of themselves for having certain education, certain experiences, what have you. They tend to look down on outsiders' perspectives, I guess you might say. And also there's the fact that we know what went down. But if you were to look objectively at what went down from an outside perspective as someone who wasn't there, yes, honestly, a lot of what they say does make sense, because a lot of what China did could be misinterpreted, especially in light of the fact that it was a popular sheriff that she set on fire. There might be a lot of evidence that he deserved it, but they made the point of saying, you have some sympathy in this room, but there may be other people who will see this differently. And that is a valid point to make, because there probably were other people who would look at that same bit of evidence and just think that China was the monster. They would be wrong, but, you know, I could see how differing perceptions could, you know. Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, it almost looks like this is going to be a crap ending, and then at the very last minute, it kind of works itself out, you know?
Yeah, there's like a trauma bond kind of thing where, like, China can understand to some degree, like, what the girl's been through.
And
because they had similar experiences, and, like, they use that as a connection.
Yeah.
And she's able to get Ariel to speak again. Just
she at one point in time tells her, hey, anytime you want to call out to me, call out Badger, and I will be there, because you are no longer alone. And that is what she says when she's about to leave. Badger.
I did wonder, as I was watching this, what fans of Wind of the Willows would make of this story.
I mean, I never read it, but I saw like a few different adaptations when I was little, and I thought that was pretty cool.
Cool, yeah. It is one I need to read. I never have.
So I do. All I really remember about like the books though is like I think it's like Frog and Toad are friends, and like seeing some discussions about, well, they were actually gay, because the author, it was heavily implied that he had a friend, and I saw a debate on this once, and people were just basically like pointing out pictures from like Frog and Toad Are Friends. It's like, no straight men would do stuff like this, and it's just them like on a tandem bike and shit, and it's like, okay, all right, I see your point. Neat. I'm down for it. So it seems like there's kind of a lot of like interesting literary history in that too. I sound like a lunatic, don't I? Well, whatever. You get what you pay for, folks. I don't know why I thought that was funny. But
So, like,
yeah, it was a nice kind of wraparound to having that be their connection. And when we had the flashback of China reading Wind in the Willows like as a child, and we saw Ariel reading it in the room, I thought that the movie was maybe going to do a twist thing, and Ariel was actually a hallucination, like, because there's a doll that looks like Ariel in the corner, and for a little while I thought that like the twist of this movie was going to be that Ariel's body is that doll, like she's been dead this whole time, and like China had such a bad trauma resurfacing that she's just like imagined a lot of this stuff going on. So I'm happy the movie did not do that, because that would have been pretty. This movie was already kind of fucked up,
Yeah.
That would have been a little much.
Well,
so
I think
does anybody else have anything else to add though before we wrap this up about it?
I think Jake's coming back in a minute. But I mean, I was very impressed with this. Even though I've been kind of rambly about like different parts of it. I mean, this is a movie that I did not feel bored at any point really past like the first like 15, 20 minutes, when it's just like, yeah, we're hanging out with this family, it's cool. Like when it suddenly like took that sudden twist, because we've been doing a lot of movies that are just kind of slice of life like that. It is just, oh yeah, it's like this light comedy thing where we're hanging out. And so I had no idea this was a serial killer movie at all when I turned it on. So I was pleasantly surprised, and I'm really happy I saw this.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Like you said, at the beginning, I don't know what it was about this movie when I first saw this. If I remember right, there was a lot of hype about it because it was a TV movie. If I remember right, there was a lot of hype about it coming on. And I think that's how I ended up with it on a VHS, was because I recorded it when it came on. And
that's right. You did have it on VHS at one point.
yeah, I did. And I had recorded it. And it was just something that caught me about this, and it just, you know, I've always enjoyed it. There's, of course, I have movies in my collection, like, but this is one of the ones that I can say just it got me the first time, and you know, it was just something about it. There's just not all the movies in my collection did that. Just because they're in my collection doesn't mean they got me the right way. Right away.
Right.
But this was one of them. And I think other people over the years that I've turned on to this movie have enjoyed it too, and been like, wow, that they weren't expecting this or that, or
A lot of people don't realize that there's a lot of Dean Koontz movies and TV movies, that are out there. Maybe not as much as there are Stephen King ones, but there is some, I would say, history of Now, whether it be novels of his or movies that are part of filmography. So I, I think they guarantee having a second look, or even at least a first look, uh, because some of the movies go back into the 80s. So
I
and
think when I watched it the first time, it was I had gotten into other things of his books and stuff, and that's why when I knew it was coming on, that's why I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, I want to see that." You know. So
well, did we want to talk about production then? Jake, are you back?
I am. Yes.
did you have
What did
anything
you think
you
about
wanted to add?
production?
The production, well, like I said, for a late '90s TV movie, I think the production was pretty solid. Uh, I wouldn't say there was any major glaring issues there. They had an interesting thing early on, like that first scene where we see China's childhood. There's sort of a weird kind of what do I want to say?
Fisheye lens filter.
Almost
Rocking
like a
camera.
dream-like sequence.
Well, it's like the camera's kind of rocking back and forth, and it kind of, I felt like they were maybe trying to mimic how clearly drug addled her mom and her mom's boyfriend tended to be. I don't recall that they did that in later scenes. Maybe they did, but I thought that was an interesting choice. For most of the rest of the film, it was a pretty static camera that I thought did its job well without being calling attention to itself. The only other thing that I would say in terms of the production overall, well, I've already, I guess, commented on the acting, but this to me was one of the biggest TV movie elements of it. I felt like uh, Molly Parker as China in particular, also basically the entire Templeton clan, really most of the characters, but especially those in those early scenes with the Templetons, and then a lot of what China had to do as the movie went on. There's a certain sort of like, I don't even know how to describe if there's an
Dispense with reality,
What's that?
or dispense with reality, or
No, it's like
Kind of surreal.
well, maybe it's more of a what I think of as a TV style of acting. I can't really describe it stronger than that. And again in Ariel as well. If I'm being honest, I feel like the again, I think John C. McGinley just knocked his role out of the park. And a couple of the supporting characters here and there also did a really solid job. I mean, Piper Laurie's a great actress. She isn't in the movie long and doesn't get to do that much. I feel like the film would have been a whole lot stronger with a stronger level of acting, but it's not bad. It's just, but I know it's really vague to say it feels like a TV movie. That's not a great way, especially because nowadays there is almost there's no line. There's no,
so would you call the acting in there B movie acting?
Maybe that's the way to say it. B movie, like as late as about the early aughts, there was this divide. Like you do movies or you do television. Like, and this is, I feel it's what do I want to say? A relic of its era? Is that the way to put it? I would like to see a more modern take on this, I guess might be a way to put it. But other than that, I feel like the production was pretty solid. You know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I could see that.
I felt the production was pretty good too, because because you didn't need a lot of this or that or whatever to make this movie. You know, you didn't have. They didn't really use CGI stuff back then that much, anyways. But I mean, it. I like movies that are, how do you say it, for real. Okay, you didn't, you know, have all this other stuff to make this happen or make that happen or make I you know that's what I like. You know, it was how do you everything was believable that happened. You know,
Grounded.
so that's part of what I liked about it.
What about you, Dustin? What did you think about the
Yeah,
production?
the production was pretty good. Like I said just now, it felt very grounded. Like there wasn't anything too crazy. I mean, the stunts were pretty good. Like there's a lot of like breaking glass and explosions, and like the fire burn at the end, that was fantastic, really. So this movie had pretty bulletproof production. Although I will say, in some of the close-ups of the dogs, like you could tell that they were using like puppets. Like they you could tell they were not live dogs, but they looked pretty close, and they did a mostly pretty good job of cutting away before it was like too obvious. I mean, like I kind of knew what to look for, so it didn't necessarily work on me, but there were a couple flashes where it's like, okay, I can definitely tell that that's not a real dog. Like that is a dog head on something.
Okay.
But that's really the only real issue. That's really the only issue with the production itself that I could really find. I mean, and I'm trying to think of. I'm trying to just be sure there's nothing else I can think of in there. Well, yeah, it was pretty good, and there were some really well written moments too. Like not necessarily like big plot moments, like little moments. Like her friend is, about to die. Like after he comes in, he's gonna come in and finish her friend off, and she's speaking to her friend one last time, and her friend says, "Don't die for me." Like that was a memorable line, and I think the movie sold moments like that well. If we want to include like acting like in the production, like even though that character didn't have a whole lot to do, that was a pretty solid moment. And like the car crashes were all pretty believable too. So it was overall, the production I think was fantastic, except for those like slightly fake dogs that one time. So nothing but praise, really, at least for me.
Okay. Oh well, I thought the production. Oh hey Kyle. I thought the production was pretty good. I think the locations were pretty believable. I guess as far as acting goes, I was okay with it. I get what you're saying, Jake, about the slightly mediocre acting, but I don't think or feel like in the 90s that was necessarily needed per se. I think Dean Koontz was starting to go towards the way that Stephen King was doing some of his movies, where Stephen King thought that the mini series platform actually showed his novelizations better when it comes to the presenting the way things go. And I thought that for one of his main novels that he put out, this was a pretty good production all around. To me, it was sound, and I felt like it was kind of like swept under the rug with all the hype that it had at the time. So I do I do think that it was entertaining at the time, and I do think it still kind of holds up. So other than that, did we want to go into? Was there much music involved in it? I'm trying to remember.
I can't remember a lot either, honestly.
Let me see if there is anything. Okay. Go down. Okay, it doesn't really say that it did have any kind of a soundtrack. So, but I do think they did go with a composer. The music was done by George S. Clinton. And it looks like he was the composer for Mortal Kombat, the movie, and Austin Powers International Man of Mystery, The Spy Who
Yeah, he's done a bunch of good
Shagged Me,
stuff.
and Goldmember.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's still doing stuff.
I think the music was effective. It didn't set the world on fire, but it did its job.
Yeah, so he's involved in a lot of films. So that he did the stuff for the Santa Claus 2 and 3. And he did the music behind Mortal Kombat Annihilation. I know that's your favorite film, Big. Shortly after this. But yeah, other than that, let's go into favorite scenes and or favorite characters. Let's start with you, Dustin. What was a favorite scene and or favorite character or scenes?
Well, I think our killer would have to be my favorite character, even though for the life of me I cannot remember his freaking name, no matter how hard I try. So, because he's just
Edgeler Vess. Interesting name.
Edgeler Vess.
Don't feel bad. I didn't remember it either because he only says it like once. I believe that's it.
He's just the guy throughout most of the movie. Yeah, that's true. It's not Edgar, it's Edgelore. Yeah, I remember that discussion now. Since he's just it's been a while since I've seen a villain like that. Who's just unrepentantly in it for fun, he doesn't really have a motivation. Like, it's, I don't know, there's something kind of pure about just like that kind of evil, It's hard to explain, but I thought it was. I think he was probably the most interesting character in the movie, just because it's like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, for fun. Okay. And I think my favorite scene is probably when the old lady is trying to like distract him or like slow him down, because she's like, oh no, I didn't believe that girl, and she's trying to make up for it by tailing him too. But this is just after China had more or less tried to run him off the road. And so he had just dealt with that, and now he's got this old lady like tailgating him. And there's that line. It's a reference to, I don't know. It's a reference. I know it's a reference. I don't exactly remember what it's to, but he's like, oh, what is going on today? First it's Evel Knievel, now it's a little lady from Pasadena. It's like, and I laughed at that pretty good, because it's like there's almost like a supernatural force at work to take this guy out. And he's kind of noticing, but he's like, what? Kind of confused. And eventually he's like, all right, that's it. And he like rams her off the road, and I think he just like pummels her to death. Like, and that's, I mean, not the pummeling isn't my favorite part. It's more of the what is going on today. And that he says that a few more times throughout the film, as he's just kind of noticing like the wolves and just all this other stuff going on around him, and kind of low key freaking out a little bit. Like especially with the wolf track too. Just his character was so interesting because it's villains like that. Yeah, they do exist, but it's always nice to get one, I guess. So, and with that, I am going to sign off because I really have to use the bathroom. So subscribe to the Cryptic Horrors, new videos whenever. I almost got my room clean enough to film something yesterday. So yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
we're actually doing it instead of just saying we're going to do it. Like, I think taking basically a year break from my horror YouTube collecting channel, I think that's going to kind of revitalize my enthusiasm for it, because I was kind of pushing myself to just do stuff for the sake of doing stuff, not because I wanted to do stuff. So I'm looking forward to coming back on that, and I think we're just about ready. So,
Well, it was nice to have you on again.
Yep.
Well, yeah, I'll keep coming on pretty much as long as I'm able. So, anyway, good night, everybody.
Yep. Good night.
Night.
Alrighty. Heading over to you, Jake.
Okay.
If you had a favorite character and/or favorite scene, what would it be?
I mean, I can't really say this is a favorite character, but he is definitely the most fun to watch. It's definitely my favorite performance in the film. It's hard to pick a true favorite in this one. I'm probably going to have to go with the old cop, Lou Mancuma's character. He was a good guy, but deserved better. But as far as scenes, I guess the initial big confrontation maybe between China and Vest, where they have that Russian roulette thing, and we find out basically where he gives her his whole thing, and then also the scene at the convenience store with him mouthing off to those two guys and them just looking at him in absolute horror. Like, I don't know, I just like both of those were really good scenes, I thought. And yeah, that's about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about you, Tammy? Favorite character and/or favorite scene?
China's my favorite character. I like, even though at the beginning what she was doing wasn't really making sense at first, but she had something that was pulling her and drawing her to do what she did, and she just wasn't going to give up, and she was going to save that little girl, Ariel. So, yeah. Excuse me. So favorite scene? Well, of course, I like the first. I like when you saw the wolfies to begin with, because I love wolves. So, jeez. But other than that, I like the ending, and I liked he got what he deserved. So,
Okay, is that pretty much it then?
yep.
Okay. Well, I myself, I couldn't entirely invest myself entirely in China. Partially because I probably wouldn't have followed the dude in the RV, and I get it. Eventually, she found out there was someone to save, but at one point, she could have just like stayed at the house and called the cops, you know, and done something there. Although maybe she knew that her friend was like in the RV or whatnot, but I get that you know, eventually it became about saving Ariel, but you know, there were a lot of buts. As far as characters go, I got a kick out of John McGinn's character, Mr. Vess. Um, he was having fun with the role, and he just brought something to the character that you know, he put all of us on creep mode. You know, uh, he definitely did go a little bonkers, you know, when it came to being a serial killer. And honestly, besides Hannibal Lecter, how many serial killers do we entirely know that have interesting personalities? Weird, off key, um, and definitely are memorable. And I think this one is, and has been ever since I watched it the first time. But that being said, I have to. I'm trying to think because I do like some of the background of her. Um, uh, the cockroach scene was slightly creepy, and then when the boyfriend popped out, he was like, "How's the birthday, girl?" You know. And then let's see, the murder scene was interesting. Um, it kind of flew by a little bit, but I thought that was slightly interesting. And his dialogue in the gas station is priceless for some reason when he goes into that intensity speech that's entertaining. But I do enjoy. I think my favorite moment is when actually the wolf helps her move that table up, and she's like got superhuman strength. You know, that's my favorite. Besides the ending where Duke gets burned, but that wolf scene right there, where it comes to her rescue almost, is like one of my favorite scenes. So other than that, does anyone else have anything else to add?
No.
Alrighty. Well, on that note, uh, did we want to go through our outros or whatnot? I'm even trying to remember what movie is next week. Do you remember
It's
what movie
Kingpin.
is next week?
Which one?
Kingpin.
Okay, so that is one of yours.
Yep. We'll be doing
So-
the classic Farrelly Brothers film, which is a phrase you'll rarely hear me say, but but yes.
Okay. Well, on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I think we've done our outros before. I think y'all know who we are, but hopefully you don't find it too intense that we end our discussion, and let everyone have a very good night.
Yep.
So good
Good
night,
night.
everyone.
Good night, all.